The city street was alive with the evening rush, cars honking impatiently, people hurrying across crosswalks, neon lights flickering from the small shops that lined the sidewalks in the middle of the chaos. A black girl, no older than 17, stood, waiting at the bus stop, her hands clutching a worn-out backpack, her eyes lowered, trying to block out the noise around her. A white delivery driver leaned out of his truck window, his laughter cutting across the hum of the street. "Hey, useless girl," he shouted loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "What are you even doing standing there wasting air? You will never amount to anything." His words drew a few stares. Some people glanced awkwardly, then quickly looked away, as if pretending they had not heard the cruel insult. The girl's cheeks burned, but she stayed silent, her lips pressing together so hard they trembled. The driver smirked, satisfied with his little performance, and revved his engine, but before he could roll forward, a sudden cry erupted from the other side of the street. A man in a business suit staggered, clutching his chest, his briefcase slipping from his hand. He fell to the ground, his body convulsing. The sound of his head striking the pavement sent a chill through the crowd. A woman screamed, people froze, some pulled out their phones to record, others simply stood still, caught in the grip of shock. No one moved to help. The driver leaned further out his truck window, laughing again now at the man who lay twitching on the asphalt. "See, even the rich ones drop like flies," he said cruelly. The girl's heart pounded. She had seen this before, years ago, in a different place, a person falling, their breaths growing shallow while everyone else stood around waiting for someone else to do something. She dropped her backpack and pushed through the small crowd, her knees hitting the hard ground beside the fallen man. His face was turning gray, his lips blue, his eyes rolled back. People murmured, "Someone call an ambulance. Hurry, hurry," but their hands held only their glowing phones. Trembling, unsure of what to do, she pressed her fingers to his neck, searching for a pulse. It was weak, fading every second. Counted. Her mind raced back to the nights she had spent learning CPR from an old neighbor who once worked as a nurse. She remembered the steady rhythm, the compressions, the breaths. She positioned her hands on the man's chest, ignoring the gasps from those watching her. "What is she doing?" someone whispered. "She will make it worse," another voice said. She focused, blocking them all out. She pushed down hard. 1, 2, 3, 4, counting under her breath. The man's chest rose and fell with each compression. Sweat beaded on her forehead. The driver shouted again from his truck window, "Useless girl, you will kill him. Stop it." But his laughter faltered when he noticed the growing silence around him. The girl tilted the man's head back, pinched his nose, and breathed into his mouth. Once, twice, then returned. 2 compressions, her arms aching, but she refused to stop. She thought of the man's family somewhere waiting for him. She thought of the cruel words thrown at her moments ago, and how saving this stranger's life mattered more than anything. Her voice shook as she muttered, "Stay with me. Come on, stay with me." The sirens of an ambulance began to wail, faint in the distance, but growing louder. Someone shouted, "They are coming. Hold on, keep going." The girl kept pressing, her strength nearly gone, each second stretching like eternity. The man's body jerked slightly, his chest rising on its own for the briefest moment. She gasped, pushing harder, harder. The driver fell silent completely now, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his mocking grin replaced with a look of unease. He had never expected the girl he ridiculed to take control of a life-and-death moment in front of everyone. The crowd leaned closer, hushed, some eyes wide, some filled with tears, phones forgotten in their hands, as they watched the black girl once mocked as useless breathe life into a dying man. Her arms shook. She had no idea if she was doing enough or if the man would survive, but she refused to stop. She would not let him go. She counted again, 1, 2, 3, for her voice hoarse, sweat dripping down her temples, her heart pounding as if it might burst. The sirens grew louder, lights flashing closer. The crowd waited, frozen, breathless. Then the man's body jolted, his chest rose sharply, air wheezed out of his lungs, his eyes fluttered open for the briefest instant. Gasps erupted from the bystanders. Someone shouted, "He is breathing! He is breathing!" She leaned back just as the paramedics rushed in, pushing through the stunned crowd, their gloved hands taking over their equipment, snapping open around the man. One of them looked at her and nodded. "You did good. You saved him." Her body sagged with exhaustion, her hands trembling, her knees scraped from the concrete. The driver sat frozen in his truck, silent, unable to find a new insult, his laughter drowned out by the sound of hope returning to a life everyone else thought lost. The crowd turned their eyes to the girl who had dared to act, while others stood still. The girl whose silence had carried more power than the loudest mockery in that moment. She was no longer The useless girl at the bus stop. She was something else entirely, and though the man was lifted onto the stretcher, though the paramedics worked quickly, and the flashing lights cut through the night, the driver's mocking words echoed back at him, hollow and meaningless. The girl picked up her backpack, her arms shaking but her eyes steady, and for the first time the crowd looked at her, not with pity, not with disdain, but with respect, a respect born from witnessing something they would never forget. The flashing ambulance lights painted the street in red and white streaks, the sirens still echoing as the paramedics loaded the man onto the stretcher. People whispered in disbelief, some wiping tears, others staring at the girl who had stepped forward while the rest froze. Her chest still heaved from the effort, her palms sore from the compressions she had forced herself to give. The paramedic closest to her glanced up and said, "If you had waited even 2 more minutes, he would not be here. You saved him, kid." She nodded weakly, but inside she felt a storm of emotions, not pride, not relief, just a strange emptiness that she could not name. The driver finally climbed out of his truck, his face pale, but his voice trying to hold authority. He sneered, "She just got lucky. Do not make her out to be some kind of hero. Anyone could have done it." The crowd turned to him, their eyes sharp. His words hung in the air like poison, and yet nobody echoed his laughter this time. The girl bent down to pick up her backpack, her fingers shaking, the zipper broken from being yanked so often. She pulled the straps over her shoulders, as if ready to disappear into the night, but a voice stopped her. It was a woman's voice, soft but firm weight. The woman stepped forward, middle-aged, with kind eyes. She said, "What is your name?" The girl froze, her lips parting, but no words came. She had not spoken a single word since the moment the driver mocked her. The woman placed a hand on her shoulder gently and said, "I saw what you did. Do not walk away. You matter." The girl swallowed hard, her voice tiny, almost broken. "My name is Lena." The name slipped out so quietly that only those closest heard it. The woman repeated louder for all to hear, "Her name is Lena. She saved a man's life tonight." The crowd murmured her name, some whispering it, as though testing its strength on their tongues, but the driver rolled his eyes. "Worthless hero act," he muttered. "She will crawl back into the shadows tomorrow." Lena turned and met his eyes for the first time, her gaze steady, unflinching. She did not say a word, but the silence pressed harder against him than any insult ever could. The paramedics shouted, "We are moving out. Make way." The crowd parted, the ambulance roared to life, and in a moment it was gone. The noise of the city slowly returned, cars honking again, neon lights flickering as if the world had reset, yet something in the air had shifted as Lena walked toward the corner. A few people followed, not to harass her but to ask questions. One young man stammered, "Where did you learn to do that?" Another said, "Have you saved someone before?" Lena kept her head down, her pace quickening, her chest tightening, each question pulling her back to memories. She had buried memories of a small apartment where the air smelled of cheap coffee and disinfectant. Memories of a neighbor, an old nurse who used to teach her late at night when her mother worked double shifts. Memories of another man collapsing, but that man had not lived. The image seared forever in her mind. Her steps slowed, her breath hitching as tears threatened to surface. She gripped her backpack tighter, whispering to herself, "Not again, not this time." She turned a corner hoping to disappear, but heavy footsteps followed her. It was the driver, his face red with frustration, his pride wounded from being silenced in front of strangers. He hissed, "You think saving one man makes you important? Do not fool yourself, girl." Lena froze, her shoulders tense. She wanted to walk faster, but he blocked her path, towering over her, his eyes sharp with anger. "No one respects me because of you," he spat. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone. You better pray that man dies, or I will make sure you regret ever touching him." His words struck like blades, but Lena stood still, her hands gripping the straps of her backpack. Though her heart pounded, she would not show him fear before either of them could move. Another voice cut through the tension, deep, commanding enough to make the driver flinch. It came from behind them. "Leave her alone." The driver turned and saw a tall man in a dark coat stepping out of the shadows, his expression grim, his eyes burning with anger. "I saw everything," the man said. "You mocked her. You stood there laughing while she saved her life. The crowd may have let you get away with it, but I will not." The driver faltered, muttering, "This is none of your business." The stranger stepped closer. "It became my business when you threatened her," he said, his voice sharp. "The girl saved a man's life tonight. What did you do?" "Nothing but spit poison." Lena stared at the stranger, her heart caught between fear and hope. The driver gritted his teeth, then spat on the ground before stomping back to his truck. But as he climbed in, his eyes lingered on Lena, a promise of trouble still hanging in the air. The stranger turned to her, his face softening. "You were brave," he said. "Do you have someone to walk you home?" She shook her head quietly. He nodded, then said, "I will walk with you if that is all right." Lena hesitated, her trust fractured from too many betrayals, but something in his tone told her he meant no harm. She nodded slightly. Together they walked down the quiet street, neon lights giving way to dim lamps. The stranger finally spoke again. "You did not freeze, that takes strength. You knew what to do when everyone else only watched." Lena whispered, "I learned from someone once, long ago." The stranger nodded without pressing further. When they reached her block, he stopped and said, "Be careful. The driver is angry, and men like that do not forget, but remember, you are stronger than his words." Lena's throat tightened. She wanted to thank him, but the words caught in her chest. She only nodded before slipping inside the cracked doorway of her apartment building. Upstairs in her small room, she sat on the edge of her bed, her hands trembling. She pulled out an old photo from beneath her mattress. A photo of her mother, smiling, tired eyes but warm smile. And beside her, a man who Lena barely remembered, her father gone too soon. She traced their faces with her finger, whispering, "I saved him, Mum. I saved someone." This time her tears finally broke free, flowing down her cheeks. The sounds of the street faded outside, but inside her chest, a new fire flickered, small but steady. She had done something no cruel word could erase. She had reminded herself that even broken hearts could bring life to another. And somewhere in the city, the driver sat gripping his steering wheel, his mind replaying the crowds, silence, the strangers, words, and Lena's unwavering gaze. And with each replay his anger grew darker, twisting into something more dangerous. While Lena closed her eyes, clutching the photo, the storm outside her door was only beginning. The next morning the city carried on as if nothing had happened, but for Lena the night lingered in her bones. Her arms still ached from the compressions, her throat still burned from the breaths she forced into the man's lungs. Her dreams had been restless, filled with echoes of sirens and the driver's cruel laughter, mixed with the sound of her own desperate counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. She walked through the crowded street toward the small diner where she washed dishes before school, the air heavy with the smell of fried bacon and coffee. Her boss, a gruff man with gray hair, glanced up when she slipped in late. "You are late again, Lena," he said, but there was no anger in his tone, only something softer, almost curious. "I heard about what you did last night. People are talking." Lena froze, her cheeks warming. He waved a spatula in the air, half smiling. "They say you saved a man's life. That is no small thing." Lena tried to speak, but her voice faltered. She turned quickly toward the sink, the clatter of dishes filling the silence. She hated the attention. She wanted to disappear back into the shadows, but whispers followed her throughout the day, customers pointing, the cook nudging her boss, one woman even leaving her a folded note with the words, "Thank you for being brave." Lena tucked it away in her pocket, trembling, unable to decide whether it made her proud or afraid. While she scrubbed plates, her mind kept drifting back to the man in the suit, the one she had saved. She wondered if he lived, if his family was with him, if he would even remember the face of the girl who refused to let him die. But just as those thoughts brought her a fragile hope, her chest tightened again, remembering another night. Long ago she had been 12 years old. Her neighbor, Mrs. Harris, a retired nurse, had been the only one who truly saw Lena's quiet strength when her mother worked nights cleaning offices. Mrs. Harris would knock on their door, inviting Lena over. She would pull out old training mannequins from her nursing days and teach her the steps of CPR. She would say, "Lena, one day you may be the only person standing between life and death for someone. Do not be afraid to use what you learn." Lena had believed her, but then came the night when her own uncle collapsed in their living room, clutching his chest. Her mother screamed, her siblings cried. Lena dropped to her knees, remembering every lesson, pressing her hands against his chest, pushing and breathing until her arms felt like breaking. But it had not been enough. Her uncle never woke up. The sound of her mother's sobs burned itself into her memory, and from that day Lena carried the weight of failure on her shoulders. She never spoke of it, not to anyone, not even to Mrs. Harris, who hugged her and said, "You did not fail, child. You tried, you were brave." But Lena never believed it. So when the man collapsed on the street last night, her body had moved before her mind could catch up, desperate to undo the guilt of years past. Desperate to not fail again now, as she rinsed the dishes, tears blurred her vision. She whispered to herself, "Not this time, he lived. I saved him." But even as she whispered those words, the memory of the driver's threat returned like a shadow. In her chest, she felt the danger circling closer. Her boss called her name, pulling her back. "Lena, go wipe the tables out front." She stepped out into the diner floor. The bell above the door jingled, and her breath caught. The driver was standing there, his eyes scanning until they landed on her. His lips curved into a smile that did not reach his eyes. He walked slowly toward a booth, sitting down, his heavy hands slamming on the table. "Coffee," he barked. The waitress hurried over, but his gaze never left Lena. She kept her eyes lowered, gripping the cloth in her hand. Her body tensed like a cornered animal as she wiped the tables. He leaned back in his seat, his voice loud enough for others to hear. "So this is where the little hero works, scrubbing plates, huh? Maybe the papers should know the truth. Maybe they should know she nearly killed that man." Lena froze. The waitress frowned, whispering, "Sir, she saved him." "Everyone knows that," the driver sneered. "People see what they want to see," he muttered. Then louder, her hands were shaking. "She was not trained. She just got lucky. If that man dies in the hospital, remember, it is on her, not on me." The diners went silent, unease spreading. Lena's heart hammered. She wanted to run, but her feet felt cemented. A man in the corner who had been there last night finally spoke. "I was there. I saw everything. She saved him." "You laughed like a fool." The driver's face darkened. But before he could retort, the diner door opened again, and in walked the stranger. From the night before, the tall man in the dark coat, his eyes sharp, scanning the room. They locked on the driver and narrowed without hesitation. He walked over to Lena's side. The diner held its breath. "The stranger said she saved that man, and you cannot stand it because her courage showed your cowardice." The driver slammed his fist on the table, but his words died on his tongue. The stranger leaned in, his voice low enough that only Lena and the driver heard. "You try to hurt her again, and I promise you will regret it." The driver's jaw clenched, but for once he stayed quiet. The stranger turned to Lena. "You should come with me." Lena blinked, fear and relief mixing. She whispered, "Why?" He said, "Because the man you saved wants to see you. He asked for you." Lena's breath caught. The room tilted for a moment. She nodded slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. Her boss gave her a look that said, "Go, it is all right." She followed the stranger out, the driver's glare burning into her back. As they left together, they walked down busy streets to the hospital, towering against the skyline. The stranger guided her inside. The sterile halls smelled of antiseptic, the beeping of machines echoing. Nurses hurried past. The stranger led her to a private room. Lena's steps slowed, her chest tightening. The man in the bed looked pale, tubes running from his arms, but his eyes were open, alert. When they met hers, they softened. He gestured weakly. "Come here, child." She stepped forward, her hands trembling. He whispered, "You saved me. Thank you." Lena's lips parted, but no words came. The man smiled faintly. "My name is Richard Coleman," he said. "I am alive because of you." The name sent a ripple through the stranger who stood at her side. Lena glanced between them, confusion in her eyes, but before she could ask anything, Richard's gaze sharpened, his voice rasping. "Listen to me, child. Last night was no accident. I was not just sick. Someone wanted me dead." Lena froze, her pulse quickening. The stranger's jaw tightened. He asked, "What do you mean?" Richard's hand trembled as he gripped Lena's arm, his eyes desperate. "You stepped in when no one else did, but because of that, they will come for you too." His words hung heavy in the sterile air. Lena's heart pounded as if the world had shifted beneath her feet. The man she had saved was not just a stranger. He was someone important, someone with enemies, and now by saving him, she had stepped into a storm far larger than she could have imagined. Hospital room was heavy with silence after Richard's words. Lena's breath caught in her throat, her palms clammy as she stared at the frail man whose life she had fought to hold on to. The stranger beside her shifted, his weight, his jaw-set eyes burning with suspicion. Richard coughed, his voice raspy but urgent. "I was poisoned, not sick. They planned it. The doctors do not know yet, but I felt it before I collapsed. A bitter taste, a sudden burn in my chest." This was no heart failure. Lena's stomach tightened, fear twisting deep inside her. The stranger asked who. Richard shook his head weakly. "To many enemies in business. You make rivals, but this one is close. Someone I trusted." Lena could barely breathe. She whispered, "Why tell me?" Richard's gaze softened. "Because you saved me, and because by saving me you made yourself visible to the wrong people. If they see you as a witness, they will try to silence You, the words stabbed into her chest. The stranger finally spoke, his voice low. We will protect her. Richard nodded. You already did once. Keep doing it. Lena stared between them, confusion mixing with dread. Who are you? She asked. The stranger turned to her. My name is Daniel. I am a former cop. Richard here was a client once. I owed him. Now I owe you to. Lena's legs felt weak. She gripped the railing of the hospital bed. Daniel touched her arm gently. You need to be careful. From now on, do not walk alone. Do not trust the wrong faces. The driver, his name is Mike. He is dangerous. And he is watching you. Lena's heart pounded as Richard drifted back into uneasy sleep, the machines beeping steadily. Daniel guided her out of the room, down the corridor, but as they reached the exit, a figure leaned against the wall, arms crossed. It was Mike, his sneer curling when he saw them leaving. So this is where the little hero hides. Daniel stepped in front of Lena, his voice sharp. Walk away, Mike. Mike chuckled, his eyes cold. Not tonight, hero. The higher-ups already know. She meddled. She stuck her nose where it did not belong. Now she is a problem. Lena froze, her blood turning to ice. Daniel's stance widened, his fists tightening, but Mike smirked and slipped a folded paper into Lena's backpack. As he brushed past her, his whisper chilling, you cannot save everyone, little girl. Sometimes heroes end up in graves. Lena's body trembled. Daniel grabbed her shoulder. Firmly, ignore him. He thrives on fear. They hurried outside into the sharp night air. Lena pulled the paper from her backpack, unfolding it with shaking hands. Scrawled across it were words that made her knees weaken. Stay out of this, or you will lose everything. Daniel cursed under his breath, snatching it and tearing it in half. He muttered, he is working for someone bigger. Lena, we have to figure out who. Lena swallowed hard, but inside her fear mixed with anger. She whispered, I will not let him win. Daniel studied her face, surprised at the fire in her voice, but nodded. They walked in silence until he saw her home safely. Before leaving, he said, tomorrow we meet again. Do not open the door for anyone else. When she stepped inside her small apartment, she locked the door, bolting it twice, then collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down her cheeks, clutching the old photo of her family. The weight of betrayal pressed harder than ever. Her mother had trusted relatives who abandoned her. She had trusted friends who mocked her, and now she had saved a man only to become a target. Lena whispered into the darkness, why does saving someone mean I must suffer? Outside her window, the shadows shifted. A figure stood across the street, smoking, watching the faint light from her window, before vanishing into the night. The next day, news spread quickly. Headlines, blaring, businessman survives collapse thanks to teenage girl. Lena's face blurred, but her story alive. People debated online, some praising her bravery, others doubting her skill. Trolls calling her a fraud, but hidden in the noise a darker conversation brewed in private circles. Whispers about Richard's near death spreading among those who wished him gone, and in those whispers Lena's name surfaced again at the diner. Her boss waved the newspaper, grinning, see, you are famous now. Lena flushed red, wishing the ground would swallow her. Daniel appeared, slipping into a booth, motioning her over. He laid out files, photographs, men in suits, faces marked with red circles. These are Richard's partners and enemies, he said. One of them tried to end him, and Mike is their pawn. Lena's eyes scanned the pictures, but her breath hitched when she saw one face familiar to familiar. Her old neighbor, Mrs. Harris, smiling in a photo with one of the men. Daniel frowned, noticing her reaction. You know her? Lena nodded, whispering, she taught me CPR. She was kind, like family. Daniel's eyes darkened. If she is tied to them, it means betrayal runs deeper than we thought. Lena's chest squeezed. The thought that the woman who once saved her might now be tangled with the very people trying to destroy her was unbearable. She whispered, maybe she was forced. Maybe she had no choice. Daniel said, maybe, but we cannot assume. Lena's world tilted, her trust crumbling further. She had built fragile walls around herself only to watch them shatter again. Daniel slid a phone across the table. Call me if you see anything strange, and remember, Mike will not stop. Lena clutched the phone, nodding, but her mind swirled. That night, she walked home slowly, the weight of suspicion pressing heavy. When she turned the corner, her breath caught. The door to her building stood ajar, the lock broken. Her chest tightened. She pushed it open cautiously. The hallway dim inside her apartment. The air felt wrong. The window cracked open. Her belongings shifted. Her backpack missing. Panic rose in her throat. She searched frantically, only to find on the kitchen table another note written in the same cruel hand. Next time it will not just be your bag. Next time it will be you. Her knees buckled, tears spilling, fear crashing over her like a wave. She dialed Daniel's number, her hands shaking. He answered immediately. "Stay there. I am coming," his voice firm, but she whispered, "They were here, Daniel. They were inside." Daniel's voice softened, but urgent. "Then listen to me. You are not safe anymore. Pack what you need. I will take you somewhere. They cannot find you." Footsteps echoed in the hall. Outside, Lena froze, holding her breath. The knob rattled softly, her pulse racing. She whispered into the phone, "They are here." Daniel's voice thundered, "Stay quiet. Hide. I am on my way." The knob rattled again, harder. The door creaked open, a shadow stretching across the floor. Lena clutched the phone against her chest, her whole body trembling. The shadow moved deeper into the room, and with it the cold certainty that her life was no longer her own. The door creaked wider. The shadow stretched across the floor. Lena's pulse hammered so loud, she thought whoever was entering might hear it. She crouched behind the couch, clutching the phone, her breath shallow. A man's footsteps crept inside, slow, deliberate. He whispered into the dark, "Lena, we know you are here. Come out, and this will be easier." His voice was not Mike's, it was rougher, colder. She squeezed her eyes shut, fighting panic. Daniel's voice hissed through the phone, "Lena, listen carefully. Stay low. Crawl to the back window if you can." But Lena's window had been jammed since winter. She was trapped. The footsteps grew closer. She spotted the old lamp by the couch, her fingers shaking as she reached for it. Just as the man's hand gripped the couch, she swung with all her strength. The lamp shattered against his shoulder. He cursed, stumbling back. Lena bolted past him toward the hall, but another figure blocked the doorway, broad shoulders blocking her escape. She froze, trapped. The first man lunged, but before he could grab her, the front door burst open. Daniel crashed inside, slamming into the intruder, fists flying. The two men grappled as the second tried to pull Lena away. Daniel roared, "Run, Lena, run!" She sprinted down the hall, her bare feet slapping against the cracked floorboards. The stairwell echoed with shouts and heavy blows. Behind her, she tore down the steps, bursting into the street, gasping for air. Headlights blinded her. A car screeched to a halt, and a woman's voice shouted, "Get in!" Lena froze. The driver leaned out. It was Mrs. Harris, her old neighbor, her eyes wide with urgency. Lena's mind spun, betrayal and trust colliding. She hesitated, but behind her, Daniel's voice bellowed, "Go, Lena!" She leapt into the car. The tires screeched as Mrs. Harris sped away. Lena clutched the seat, staring at the woman who once taught her how to save lives. Mrs. Harris's jaw was tight, her hands gripping the wheel. Lena whispered, "You are with them." Mrs. Harris's eyes flicked to her, then back to the road. "It is not what you think, child. I never wanted this, but you are in. Over your head. Richard's enemies will not stop. They sent those men to silence you." Lena's throat tightened. "Then why help me?" Mrs. Harris's voice cracked, "Because I owe your mother more than you know." Lena's breath caught her mother, who worked endless nights, who died too soon. Mrs. Harris whispered, "She trusted me to protect you. I failed. Once I will not fail again." Lena's heart pounded, confusion swirling. Mrs. Harris pulled the car into an abandoned warehouse, the smell of oil and rust filling the air. She turned to Lena, her face pale with sorrow. "I was tied to those men long before you were born. Your father worked for them. He tried to leave, but they killed him." Lena's eyes widened, her chest squeezing. Her father gone since she was small. Mrs. Harris nodded, tears glistening. "I raised questions. I tried to help your mother, but they pulled me in, too. I never stopped fighting from inside, and when I saw you last night saving Richard, I knew they would target you." Lena shook her head, tears streaming. "Why not tell me the truth before?" Mrs. Harris whispered. "Because the truth puts you in danger. Knowledge is a weapon and a curse." Lena clutched her chest. The betrayal cut deep, but in her heart she saw the pain in Mrs. Harris's eyes, the regret real. The door clanged open. Daniel staggered in blood on his lip, but alive, his eyes burning with fury when he saw Mrs. Harris. "What are you doing with her?" he snapped. Lena stepped between them, her voice trembling. "She saved me." Daniel growled, "She is with them, Lena. She has been from the start." Mrs. Harris lifted her hands. "I am not with them, not anymore. I am trying to undo the damage." Daniel's fists clenched, the tension heavy. Then Richard's voice echoed from behind them, weak but steady. "Stop." Tightened, fear twisting deep inside her. The stranger asked, "Who?" Richard shook his head weakly. "Too many enemies in business. You make rivals, but this one is close. Someone I trusted." Lena could barely breathe. She whispered, "Why? Tell me." Richard's gaze softened. "Because you saved me, and because by saving me you made yourself visible to the wrong people. If they see you as a witness, they will try to silence you." The words stabbed into her chest. The stranger finally spoke, his voice low. "We will Protect her, Richard nodded. You already did once, keep doing it. Lena stared between them, confusion mixing with dread. Who are you? She asked. The stranger turned to her. My name is Daniel. I am a former cop. Richard here was a client once. I owed him. Now, I owe you to. Lena's legs felt weak. She gripped the railing of the hospital bed. Daniel touched her arm gently. You need to be careful from now on. Do not walk alone. Do not trust the wrong faces. The driver, his name is Mike. He is dangerous. And he is watching you. Lena's heart pounded as Richard drifted back into uneasy sleep, the machines beeping steadily. Daniel guided her out of the room down the corridor, but as they reached the exit, a figure leaned against the wall, arms crossed. It was Mike, his sneer curling when he saw them leaving. So this is where the little hero hides. Daniel stepped in front of Lena, his voice sharp. Walk away, Mike. Mike chuckled, his eyes cold. Not tonight, hero. The higher-ups already know she meddled. She stuck her nose where it did not belong. Now she is a problem. Lena froze, her blood turning to ice. Daniel's stance widened, his fists tightening, but Mike smirked and slipped a folded paper into Lena's backpack. As he brushed past her, his whisper chilling, you cannot save everyone, little girl. Sometimes heroes end up in graves. Lena's body trembled. Daniel grabbed her shoulder. Firmly ignore him, he thrives on fear. They hurried outside into the sharp night air. Lena pulled the paper from her backpack, unfolding it with shaking hands. Scrawled across it were words that made her knees weaken. Stay out of this, or you will lose everything. Daniel cursed under his breath, snatching it and tearing it in half. He muttered, he is working for someone bigger. Lena, we have to figure out who. Lena swallowed hard, but inside her fear mixed with anger. She whispered, I will not let him win. Daniel studied her face, surprised at the fire in her voice, but nodded. They walked in silence until he saw her home safely. Before leaving, he said, tomorrow we meet again. Do not open the door for anyone else. When she stepped inside her small apartment, she locked the door, bolting it twice, then collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down her cheeks, clutching the old photo of her family. The weight of betrayal pressed harder than ever. Her mother had trusted relatives who abandoned her. She had trusted friends who mocked her, and now she had saved a man only to become a target. Lena whispered into the darkness, why does saving someone mean I must suffer? Outside her window, the shadows shifted. A figure stood across the street, smoking, watching the faint light from her window, before vanishing into the night. The next day, news spread quickly. Headlines, blaring businessman survives collapse thanks to teenage girl. Lena's face blurred, but her story alive. People debated online, some praising her bravery, others doubting her skill. Trolls calling her a fraud, but hidden in the noise a darker conversation brewed in private circles. Whispers about Richard's near death spreading among those who wished him gone, and in those whispers, Lena's name surfaced again at the diner. Her boss waved the newspaper, grinning, see, you are famous now. Lena flushed red, wishing the ground would swallow her. Daniel appeared, slipping into a booth, motioning her over. He laid out files, photographs, men in suits, faces marked with red circles. These are Richard's partners and enemies, he said. One of them tried to end him, and Mike is their pawn. Lena's eyes scanned the pictures, but her breath hitched when she saw one face familiar too. Familiar, her old neighbor Mrs. Harris, smiling in a photo with one of the men. Daniel frowned, noticing her reaction. You know her? Lena nodded, whispering, she taught me CPR. She was kind, like family. Daniel's eyes darkened. If she is tied to them, it means betrayal runs deeper than we thought. Lena's chest squeezed. The thought that the woman who once saved her might now be tangled with the very people trying to destroy her was unbearable. She whispered, maybe she was forced, maybe she had no choice. Daniel said, maybe, but we cannot assume. Lena's world tilted, her trust crumbling further. She had built fragile walls around herself only to watch them shatter again. Daniel slid a phone across the table. Call me if you see anything strange, and remember, Mike will not stop. Lena clutched the phone, nodding, but her mind swirled. That night, she walked home slowly, the weight of suspicion pressing heavy. When she turned the corner, her breath caught. The door to a building stood ajar, the lock broken. Her chest tightened. She pushed it open cautiously. The hallway dim inside her apartment. The air felt wrong. The window cracked open. Her belongings shifted. Her backpack missing. Panic rose in her throat. She searched frantically, only to find on the kitchen table another note written in the same cruel hand. Next time, it will not just be your bag. Next time it will be you. Her knees buckled, tears spilling, fear crashing over her like a wave. She dialed Daniel's number, her hands shaking. He answered immediately. Stay there. I am coming, his voice firm, but she whispered, they were here, Daniel, they were inside. Daniel's voice softened but urgent. Then listen to me, you are not safe anymore. Pack what you need, I will take you somewhere. They cannot find you. Footsteps echoed in the hall outside. Lena froze, holding her breath. The knob rattled softly, her pulse racing. She whispered into the phone, they are here. Daniel's voice thundered, stay quiet, hide. I am on my way. The knob rattled again, harder. The door creaked open, a shadow stretching across the floor. Lena clutched the phone against her chest, her whole body trembling. The shadow moved deeper into the room, and with it, the cold certainty that her life was no longer her own. Every own. Turned, Richard stood, leaning on a cane, pale but determined, flanked by a bodyguard he had left the hospital against. Orders. His gaze locked on Lena. You deserve the truth, he said. I am not just a businessman. I have been funding investigations into the syndicate that killed your father, the same syndicate that tried to kill me last night. Lena's breath caught. The room spinning. Richard continued, your father was not just some worker, he was my partner. He discovered corruption deep within our circle and paid with his life. Mrs. Harris tried to shield your family, but she was trapped. Richard's voice hardened. And now, by saving me, you exposed yourself to the same enemies. Lena's knees shook. She whispered, then why me? Why does it always come back to me? Richard stepped closer. Because you carry your father's courage. You refuse to stand by while others froze, and that makes you dangerous to them. Daniel glared at Richard. You should have told her sooner, Richard sighed. I wanted to protect her, but fate has already chosen her. Lena's heart ached with betrayal, loss, and a fire that would not die. She whispered through tears, I just wanted to save a man, not fight a war. Mrs. Harris's voice broke. You cannot choose now, child. The storm is already here. Richard nodded grimly. And the man you saved me from, Mike, he is only a pawn, the true hand behind. All this sits higher. Lena's eyes burned. She whispered, then tell me who. Richard's jaw tightened, his voice low. One of my partners. Harold Cross. The name hung in the air, heavy with finality. Lena remembered the headlines. Harold Cross, the philanthropist. A public saint, yet now revealed as a man who ordered deaths. Daniel muttered, that explains everything. Lena stared at them, her young shoulders trembling but her eyes hardening. The world had betrayed her. Again and again, but this time she would not break. Mrs. Harris whispered, I will stand with you. Daniel clenched his fists. I will fight for you. Richard nodded. You gave me back my life. Now I will give you protection. But Lena lifted her chin, her voice steady. No, I will not hide anymore. I will face them. Her words silenced the room. Her fear still throbbed inside, but stronger than fear was something new, a flame born of years of pain, betrayal, and survival. Lena had found her resolve. The next night a storm raged over the city, thunder shaking. The windows, rain lashing the streets. Lena stood in a dark coat beside Daniel and Mrs. Harris in a quiet alley. Richard's bodyguard, waiting with a black car inside, was a folder full of documents, proof of Harold Cross's crimes Richard had given. It's Lena saying, you are the only one I trust to reveal this. Lena clutched it tight, her eyes fixed on the towering glass building ahead. Harold Cross's empire. Daniel whispered, are you ready? Lena's breath trembled, but her voice did not. Yes. They stepped into the storm, unaware that Mike waited in the shadows, his cruel smile returning sharper than ever. Rain poured in sheets, soaking the city streets as Lena stepped out of the car, clutching the folder against her chest. Daniel at her chest, Daniel at her side. Mrs. Harris behind them. The glass tower of Harold Cross loomed above, glowing like a beacon in the storm, its polished surface reflecting lightning strikes in cold brilliance. Lena's heart pounded, each step heavier than the last. She whispered to herself, one last time, not again, not this time. Daniel pushed open the door, the lobby empty to empty, the echo of their footsteps the only sound. Suddenly the lights flickered, shadows stretching, then a slow clap rang out. Harold Cross himself emerged from the elevator, tall, in an immaculate suit, his silver hair slicked back, his smile sharp as a blade. I wondered when you would come, he said, his voice smooth but venomous. Lena's hands tightened around the folder. Harold's eyes locked on her. So this is the little girl who ruined everything, saved Richard when you should have stayed in your place. He stepped closer, his smile cold. You should have let him die like your father. Lena's chest seized the words, slicing her like knives. Daniel growled, you killed her father. Harold tilted his head. Correction, I ordered it. Richard was getting too close to truths that would destroy me. Your father was loyal to him, and disloyalty has consequences. Lena's knees shook, rage boiling through her veins. Mrs. Harris cried out, you monster. Harold's gaze flicked to her, contemptuous. You, of all people, should know. The price of betrayal. You were useful once. Now you are nothing. Lena's tears blurred with fury, her voice trembling but strong. You tried to take everything from me, but you failed. Harold chuckled. You think saving one man makes you powerful, child? You are nothing. Lena's hands shook as she opened the folder, pulling out documents, photographs, bank records, signed orders, all proof of Harold's corruption, his ties to crime syndicates, his bribes and murders. She held them high, her voice breaking but loud enough to echo through the hall. This will expose you, the police, the press, everyone will. No. Harold's face darkened, his mask cracking. He snarled, you think they will believe you? You are just a girl from the shadows. No one cares about you. Daniel stepped forward, his voice steel. Then they will care about the truth. Harold snapped his fingers, the sound sharp. Two men in black suits emerged from the corners, guns drawn. Lena froze. Daniel shoved her behind him, his stance ready. Mrs. Harris grabbed Lena's arm, whispering, run. But Lena shook her head. No more running. Harold sneered. End this now. The gunmen raised their weapons, but before they could fire, the lobby doors burst open. Richard appeared, leaning on his cane, flanked by uniformed officers, their guns trained on Harold's men. Richard's voice thundered, drop them now. The men hesitated. The officers surged forward, tackling them. Harold's eyes widened, his fury twisting into desperation. He spun toward Lena, lunging, his hands outstretched to rip the folder from her grip. But Lena stood firm, her voice shaking with all the rage, grief and strength she had carried for years. You called me useless, you called me nothing, but I saved a life. I carried the weight of loss. I endured your hate and your poison, but tonight I end it. She slammed the folder against his chest, the officers seizing it. Harold stumbled, rage contorting his face, as handcuffs snapped around his wrists. He shouted, you will regret this, girl. You think you won, but this city will always belong to men like me. Lena's voice rose clear and unshaken. Then let them hear the truth. Harold was dragged away, his screams fading into the storm. Silence filled the lobby, broken only by Lena's heaving breaths, her body trembling but her eyes steady. Richard stepped closer, his face weary but proud. You did what even I could not. You faced him and you won. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice soft. You are stronger than you know. Mrs. Harris wept quietly, whispering, I promised your mother I would protect you. I failed too many times. But tonight you proved you never needed saving. Lena turned to her, tears streaming, but this time they were not tears of fear but of release. She whispered, I am not useless. I never was. Richard nodded, his voice heavy with emotion. No, child, you are a hero. The world will know your name. In the weeks that followed, the story broke across every screen. Headlines blaring, teenage girl exposes powerful tycoon, saves businessman's life. Crowds once silent now spoke her name with respect. People debated, argued, but in every corner of the city one truth burned through. Lena had not been nothing. She had been the spark that lit a fire. Harold's empire crumbled, his allies arrested, his secrets spilled. Richard recovered slowly, his gratitude to Lena never fading. Daniel remained by her side, a guardian and friend. Mrs. Harris left the shadows, finally free of chains that bound her past, and Lena, she returned to her small apartment, but it no longer felt the same. The photo of her mother still lay beneath her mattress. She pulled it out one evening, holding it to her chest, whispering through tears, I did it, Mom. I saved him and I saved myself. She stepped to the window, rain tapping against the glass, neon lights glowing in the night. Her reflection stared back, not the broken girl mocked at a bus stop, not the child haunted by failure, but someone new, stronger, resilient, whole. Her journey scarred, but her spirit unbroken. She whispered to the city outside, sometimes losing everything is the only way to find who you really are. And for the first time the silence around her was not heavy, but peaceful, a silence filled with promise. Lena closed her eyes and breathed deep, her heart finally free. Then